So we'll go ahead and start up. We're doing Synon 2E show and tell. Actually, CA 2E show and tell. You can tell I slip every once in a while and call it Synon yet. Yeah, Jasmine. Or cool. We're cool today. Yeah. Okay, so Eamonn's going to give us some tips and tricks on what he does with. Let's see, display control. Is that what it is? Dynamic display. So and then after that, we'll have Jonathan, and then Russel will be bringing up the tail end. All right, Eamonn, take it away. And you guys each have about 15 plus or minus minutes. So I'll put a ringer on just so we have the 15-minute. And then that way everybody knows about where you're at. Yeah, we'll have to mute ours now. Unless we want feedback.
Okay, are we getting feedback?
There you go.
There we go.
All right, we're in good shape now.
Okay. Well, my name is Eamonn Foley. I am IT Operations Manager for Berkeley Corporation. I've been in Synon for about 25 years or so now. And I'm going to talk a little bit about taking control of screen attributes. So, a dynamic display. What is the problem and why do we even care? Well, for one thing, 2E limits what we can really do when it comes to formatting our fields. We can basically, we have an either or option. It's either this or it's that. And then we also get to when it's an error. It's basically it. Not a whole lot we can really do. In some instances, you can even run into a situation in which you have so many fields on the screen and you are doing so many things with them that 2E runs out of indicators, and then you get to play a game of whack-a-mole trying to figure out which one will get you back to a situation where you have enough indicators to cover the whole screen again. And sometimes we just need to be able to do more. One of the examples that we came up with is on our system, we have a screen that tells how long trucks have been sitting in the warehouse. They might be green, they might be yellow, they might be red. So that's more than you can really do with things today. So what we came up with is, well, we didn't really come up with it. What we use is a DDS option called a PField. It was introduced many, many, many years ago when even the people at IBM realized that this sucks. And they needed to come up with a way that had something other than indicators to track everything. What this PField gives us is the ability to dynamically control what the screen options are going to be from within the program. And the display attributes themselves are done by associating a particular hex code. Okay, not a set of hex tools, not hex the magic thing. It's actually hex codes. Sorry, I just had to do that. I just needed something fun. So that's great, but how does that work in 2E, since we all know that 2E has some limitations when it comes to things like this. So the way it works is there's actually 3 components that make this work within the model. The first is we define a PField within the model, which is really just a 1-character field. It can be a text field, it can be a status field, it can be a code field, it can be a narrative, anything so long as it's an alphanumeric field. Okay. The next thing we need is the scary part, which is we're going to do user source, which I know is a 4-letter word in a lot of shops. I used to be one of those who was, it's a 4-letter word in a lot of shops. And of course, now people who've worked with me know that I use user source whenever it becomes available to me and whenever I need it, because it's just, as I was taught, you can do anything with TUI. There are just a lot of things you may not necessarily want to do. There are better options. So the user source is actually very, very simple. And I give the example of what it actually looks like. And there's going to be just 2 pieces of it. And it amounts to a grand total of 3 lines of, well, 1, 2, 3, I think 5 lines total of user source to make it work. So it's really a very tiny thing. The last thing is a program that returns the hex values. And I did it this way. I do a program to do this. Number 1, because it makes it very portable. And number 2, because I'm a mixed shop. I have RPG and COBOL, which is, in and of itself, it's cats and dogs living together. It's anarchy. But I did it this way to ensure that both models are able to use it without any issue. So how do we define the P-field? So the first thing you want to do is you really want to plan what you're going to do, because the actual sign-on name, the actual 25-character name for your field is very important later on, because we're going to be looking for that specific name. So you want to make sure you get a standard for how you want to name all these specific fields so that they're easy to write the user source for. Another thing you may or may not want to do is you may want to change the generation name, because both the sign-on name and the generation name are used in the user source. It is entirely optional if you want to change the generation name, because part of our model is pure COBOL. The model uses the long COBOL names, not the 4-character name. So you'll see that it's actually spelled out and is easier to read, but your mileage may vary. So here's an example of us creating a P-field. And again, 25 characters, I like to make use of, we want to make use of as much of the name as possible, so it's descriptive. So we called it PField 01 display attribute. The really important part of this whole thing is going to be that PField 01, because that's pretty much the easy part to go looking for. And the reason why we put the numbering in there is because you're going to have more than one. I've been where we had as many as 43 or 50. Do you remember how many, Mark, we had back at back there? Yeah. We had, it was nothing to have like 60 fields on the screen. So we had to have a lot of these. And you see that it's just a 1-character text field. And we happen to call this particular one PField 01 because we had the long names. So now comes the scary user source piece. See, like I said, very scary. Here's the first 3 lines, and I was wrong. It's only 4 lines, not 5. So this is how we turn a P field into this is how we turn the P field into a real P field. And what we're doing is we're taking that PField 01 display attribute, and we are going to replace the code that's there. So what happens is I add these fields to my screen, and I hide the field. And it's important to hide the field because you don't want it taking up any space on the screen. And we won't need it later on. We just want it in the DDS. Because this will go out and search the DDS and replace that field name with our field. And the yellow is if anyone has never used the scan and replace, that would be really good for somebody to do for the next sign-on one, next conference. But there is a scan and replace option that will search all of your text in the generated code, find whatever, and follow those instructions. In this case, it's going to look for the PField 01, and it's going to replace it with the code that I have here. And this in turn, it comments out the original line so you never lose the code. And it puts our new line in, but now it's turned that field that's on the screen and available to our programs into a programmable field. Okay. The red arrow was the gen name. So you can see there's our PField 01 from the previous scene. The ZC that's in front of it is identifying what the format that it's on. Is this, in this case, this is a screen field in the control context. There is also a, you could do a ZD for a detail screen, like a prompt record or an edit record. And you can do a ZR for the subfile record, which covers all of the available places you would be doing something on the screen. And then lastly, I changed the replace is replacing the original hidden field as a P field. So this is the actual user source line. And then for each one of the P fields that I might create, you know, might be 02, 03, 04, I will have a corresponding user source line. So the user source part deux. Sorry, I was watching Hot Shots part deux. This is attaching, this is how we then turn that P field and tie it to what field we want to control on the screen. One P field can control one field. It can control 10 fields. Control an entire record if you want. Sorry, the picture came in the wrong spot on this. So this is the other line of user source. And you'll see it's just into, again, it's the DDS, and I'm just adding a display attribute, and I'm tying it back to that field name. So at this point, the display attribute that's going to be used for this field is whatever the hex code is in the PField 01. So now, all program long, I can just keep cycling through and keep changing it. The last piece is my little user program. It's a very simple RPG LE program. I'd be more than happy. I'll give it to Mark to put up to include with the presentation, the source code. It takes two parameters, passes in a code, 01 through 064. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's 32 or 64, something along those lines. But it returns out the actual hex code. Since trying to set a hex code in Synon is complicated, can be done. You can build it up, put it in there. It's just easier to do it this way. My input parameter is a field I call color condition. It's a status field, and it has listed in it all of the possible conditions that are available. There is a finite number in DDS, so once it's set, I don't have to change it again. And I named the status field so that it clearly describes what the code actually is. And now it's showtime. So we're going to do a live demo, hoping this works. Probably should sacrifice a goat first, but so here is a live test. So I've got a simple little, and just to show that this is real, if somebody wants to shout out something, I can type in here. No one said anything.
No one's listening. How's that?
That works. So as you can see, I have set the values here. They're just a set of simple, easy use numbers. And then my description is actually setting out everything that's here. And the way this is laid out, they're laid out so that I have the color and then all of the different associated attributes, green and underlined. You know, you can do a white and reverse image.
The really cool thing you can do with that, though, is change an input field to an output field.
Now, the other thing you can do with this is you can actually then set fields to actually be protected. So I cannot change the code down. I can't change the text that's down there, whereas I can go here, oops, non-display. There we go. And it's going to keep writing over it, but it allows me then, so I can dynamically in my program say this is now output. I can make something non-display on the screen and output. And it just gives me a great deal of flexibility with being able to do this. And there's no limit to the number of, because the field gets hidden on the screen, there's no real limit to how many of these you can do. So if you've got a screen that's packed full of fields, Mark and I can attest to seeing some screens that had every square inch of space on the screen had mostly input fields. There were very little in the way of just, there was very little text to highlight, it's a bare minimum amount to identify what the field was, and that's it. So this becomes very useful. Some great, like I said, some great examples are if you've got displays that are showing things that, depending upon what's going on, like we have how long it's been sitting and how long a truck has been sitting in the warehouse, it changes color. So as the screen is redisplaying, it is updating those colors, and at a glance, you can say, oh, this has been up here for too long. Because it's gone, it's now red.
Yeah.
This one's yellow.
46 in the new now. PField.
46.
I have one screen that I had to put 46 into.
So-
By doing this, you basically solve the problem of, the complaint that green screens don't show you enough, yet the users don't lose what I think is the faster ability to deal with data in a character-based display.
Yes. I mean, it ends up meaning you might put a little bit more work at the beginning, having to get it all set up, and having to condition the fields and putting the necessary code in there. But the long run is once you start using these, it's there for good. And the big thing is it's not like this is just hard coded to one screen. So if I've got PField number 1, I can reuse that field in another. I have a PField 1 for a subfile control, PField 1 that's got subfile record, PField 1 that's in a detail screen. So it does get a little bit easier as you create more of them, and I can reuse them over and over again in other places. That's the other reason I went with the external program to do the coding, to do the color, is that's never going to change. So once it's written, it's just done.
You have to be careful about where you insert your user source. Like it has to be on the right field,
Green content.
and it has to be and your hidden field has to be in the right sequence in the record
the,
format.
The Z something, and you can go through, and if you start looking at your model, you'll see that Z is always is on the screen context, and then there's a letter for control, record, and detail. I haven't looked too deep when it's doing when it's an edit record 2. Because we've only had 1 or 2 instances. I don't use edit trans, and edit tran is still just a control and a subfile. That part doesn't change. Yeah, it's only the multi-page detail records that I haven't looked at the DDS code for. But
All right.
yeah, there you go.
So the user source you did leads right into Jonathan. He's going to teach us RPG ILE in 10 minutes.
Let me mute.
There.
Okay, that might make a difference, huh?
Okay, good.
All right,
All
good.
right. So this lightning talk is creative execute user source objects in CA2E. Like Eamonn, when I first learned what I did about 2E a long time ago, this was 1994. The instructor I had basically said about the same thing. Yes, it's there. Don't ever use it, you know? And for years, I went along with that. And finally, I did something they also told me not to do. It was to actually read the sign-on documentation, which I still have in the small notebooks.
Like a shelf full.
Yeah, a shelf full with, you know, and I saw what it could do, what could be done with it. And I did use it a few times, but anymore with some of the interesting things you can do with freeform RPG in ILE, it becomes even more important. So that's why I created this. So the goals today is to demonstrate some imaginative uses of 2E execute user source to simplify your work while remaining in the 2E development environment. In other words, don't stray too far away, but bend it a little bit. Okay, here's a problem we have, and this occurred last year. The IRS has changed the specifications for Form 1099 processing to include a new form. Yeah, remember that?
I remember that.
You need to rewrite the code for January 1st go live date, and they announced it, what, about this time last year? Yeah. Yeah, about same thing for me.
Yeah.
The transmission file is a multiple record format file. Oh yeah, remember those? With a length of 80 characters. A lot of my younger colleagues never saw anything like this. While it can be externally described, the file has one data field and no keys, okay? And TUI cannot create access paths over unkeyed files. So what do? I can't totally take credit for this. I saw this in someone else's work, but I thought, gee, this is pretty nifty. So here are your possible solutions to the problem. You can either create an execute user program object and handcraft the thing and just fit it in. Or as I think Mark said he had done before, use print file, print object action diagram to create the various record formats and then get the data into the file. Well, as Eamonn said, he stays away from edit trans. I have the distinction, I've never done a print file, print object. So, yeah. And I had to work with the generated results coming out of Mapex. And if you remember the Disney version of the Three Musketeers, and the one Musketeer encountered something down the basement, he said it was ugly and nasty. Well, that's unfortunately my opinion of generated print file, print objects. They are ugly and nasty. So I try to stay away from them. So the third thing is a hybrid approach. Create an execute user program object to create the file and an execute external function object to populate it. But the overlooked approach would be to create execute user source objects for these situations. First, file specifications for the output file, which forces the program generator to do what you want it to do. Output specifications for the various record formats, which pretty much match the results you would get from a print file, print object approach. And then going back a bit, using calculation specifications to use exception output. Remember that? Or did you ever, did you hear of it? Remember, I also know about the logic cycle. I started with RPG 2. So exception output is a programming concept from the days of the RPG logic cycle. And its use was replaced pretty much by the write instruction with the demise of logic cycle programming and externally described files. Here, it will allow output to the file of multiple and differing record formats. which is what you get by using a print file, print object, but it's cleaner. So the program file, again, for the IRS file is one field with a length of 80. There are no keys. So what you can do here is, there it is. Here's your file, and I created it in 2E. There's your format name, and it has one field, 80 characters. The user source objects, this is what you get. You get, and it'll change, create, and delete on an update index, and then you have 3 user sources: exception, output, instruction, 1099 file definition, and the 1099 file output spec. So file definition spec, this is a file definition for program described output file with a length of 80 bytes. There you see output, program described, F, not E, length of 80, disk. When you put, oh Lord, did I miss? Oh, okay, the output file is defined with its user source, and there it is, goes in. And then here, some logic would go here to assemble the data. Again, I wasn't going to recreate the entire thing, but you have to come up with a way to assemble the data. And what you're doing is you're concatenating the various data elements into this 80 character field. So that, again, what you're talking about here is you've got 80 characters and it just gets put in. And the reason it's not externally described is because you have different record formats. What happens is the first character typically in a file like this indicates the format. So that's why it doesn't get defined. And then what you do is you use the exception output to do whatever you've created, you just drop it into you use exception output to put it into the file. And then the final user source object goes there. Okay. Did I miss stuff in this one? Oh, geez. It's not the place to go. Yeah. However, the advantage to this is it does save time, because you get the same result that you get with a handcrafted program. In other words, you're not using a print file, print object, but you're getting the program generator to do all the heavy lifting for you. Reuse. Again, much of the heavy lifting is probably already being done by other functions, because in order to do something like this, you've got to be retrieving stuff from various other files, putting data together. So you've got all these typically retrieve objects that you can reuse, and you can put you just put the output together. And finally, consistency of design. While it's not a typical routine, it's still within your development environment. So it's not an execute user program. And again, a thank you.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. Yes, thank you, Jonathan. And if you want, when you give me the final slides, you can put in a couple.
Yeah, I need to put a few
If you
more.
miss something in there.
Yeah, I'll try to put something together, because I think I thought that there were more. My
Okay.
apologies there.
That's all right. Sounds good. So now we have Russell again.
Hey guys,
You get to bring up the final.
I'll
Yeah,
tell you now,
actually
mine's
about
mine's
20
over
minutes.
20 minutes, so you're gonna have to
So
push
let's
me.
go ahead.
But
Russell can. Oh, and then what I need to do is, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Say something, Russell.
yep, testing 1, 2, 3.
There we go.
All
Yep.
right, we can hear you.
Great. Thanks, guys. I'd like to one day get together with Eamonn and Jonathan there, and I think we can probably get something off to the moon in 2E.
Exactly.
With some of these tricks. But This isn't my presentation. I just wanted to show you some of what I did with the same thing as what Eamonn was talking about, multiple colors on a display file, just to
Oh.
show you it's feasible. It does work in real time. I actually did a presentation on that in one of those lunch and learn sessions for a couple of months ago.
What's?
Anyway, let's get into my stuff.
It's not
Again,
there.
Oh.
you know what I'm all about, and we're going to talk about 5250 screen design standards.
Hold on a
so-
minute.
Sorry,
Oh,
Yeah, he's good.
are you okay?
oh,
Yeah, we're okay. We were just not seeing it on the main monitor here. It's on the PC. So you go ahead.
I'm good. Okay, everyone
Yeah,
can
yeah,
see?
you're good.
Okay. So one thing I forgot to do in the last one that I like to do when I do a presentation is, just because of my Canadian accent and you may not understand, I use my PowerPoint to just actually put in the subtitling below. Over this last 18 months, I found subtitling works great when watching Netflix. So why not for this as well? So 5250 screen designs. First, I'm going to tell you right now,
There it goes.
this is not set in stone. This is just something that I do as a little programmer working in ICS Courier up in Toronto, Canada. You guys decide how you want to do your own screen designs. But when I started at ICS 7 years ago, my predecessor was retiring, and he had been working there for 30 years. So he started on the System 38, AS400, bought 2E. Unfortunately, in Canada, we don't throw out money to go for education. It's more or less you learn on as you go. So when I got there and saw his screens and how he uses 2E, it's from someone that's never taken a 2E course other than the horse racing model course. That was it. And that's how we designed the application. So keep that in mind. Keep in mind that the theme of this whole presentation, if I knew then what I know now, and I'm just going to show you some of my screen designs. If I spill over, just tell me, and if you want, I can circle back and continue it at the end of the last presentation today, if you want to see more. Okay, but let's get into it. So I'm going to show you a 2E display file. Is this running? Yeah. Okay. There we go. So let's look at this and dissect it a bit. This is when you create a display file. You've got OPT here. You've got type options, comma, press enter, period, next line, 1, select 5, zoom. You get F4 prompt and then another function key if you need. That's a standard 2E or 5250 screen. Synon puts in the F4 prompt, even though there was no F4 prompt functionality behind it, but it's there. Always drove me crazy when I would see that on a 2E screen. Like, why can't you remove that? Here's an edit file. Okay, so we can add records and we can change records on the fly. If we want to add records, we would hit the F9 key, as you all know. F4 prompting is there too, but it doesn't do anything. And then you see an F9 and you would type in your stuff and then it would vanish and the user would say, what happened to my code? No, you have to hit F9 to go back to see it. Oh, okay. That's cool. Okay, so this is typical 2E out of the box, right? And then you can make your change. So what I want to kind of do is just show you how I take a typical 2E screen and clean it up a bit. So I'm going to clean this screen up. And then I'm going to go one step further. I'm going to be like Steve Jobs and say, and now for something else. So let's go into the screen as I go into the action diagram screen. Okay, so this screen right here, OPT. So I'm already using up 2 characters of a 80 column display. That's a lot of real estate. Why can't we just remove that? Okay, now I have some real estate. Another 2 spaces in between each field. Another, real estate. Real estate is very expensive on an AS400 80 column display. So let's clean that up. Let's clean this up. So far, so good. Let's remove this stupid prompt. Who needs to see that? If it doesn't do anything, why should it be displayed? 1, select, 5, zoom. Okay, I'm just cut and paste that, keep that on my clipboard for a minute. So there, now here's where I go a little off the beaten path. I'm gonna insert a text field here. And I use a 256 column text field. It's probably a little overkill, but you'll understand in a minute. Let me find that text field because I'm working not in a Windows world. I'm working in a 5250. So here, I'm going to hide these 2 columns. The first one you don't need at all. It's on every screen. Everyone knows what to do. So why show it? Again, real estate's important. And we're going to just move this key, which is the key field. I'm just going to move it here. Blank out the label. And I'm going to change this text field here to 78, remove that, and highlight it, reverse image. So this is me being an artist in a 5250 world. I'm going to change the field option to Y, remove the Y so I can do multiple selections instead of field exiting. And maybe one other thing I would usually do, I'll just get rid of one line before. So now I have a really tight 5250 screen with however I want. Personally, I feel this looks a little more appealing to the end user. And based on the comments I've heard from my end users, they kind of like it. So yeah, those are my do something fields. So in subfile control, I'm going to put a 1 equals. And I'm going to take that text field and con and put in the selection. Maybe a little space there. There we go. So see what I did there? I made the subfile options variable. That's important. Now and then the reload subfile star yes. So when I come out of the edit file, I want to reload the subfile because if I added records, I want to see it right away. And then let's look at the edit file. I'm going to do this part really quickly because I actually showed this off in my presentation last year where I converted an edit file to do add, change, delete all on the same screen without using that pesky F9 key. And this is a quick and dirty way of doing that. So I just get rid of the change, delete, and the prompt. Are you sure you want to make a change? Then I'm going to go into the action diagram. I changed the program mode. It's already pre-set up what I was going to do here. And this is all in detail. I explained how I did this in my presentation that should be available from last October, how I did all this stuff. In the create, see there's only one, a create. I removed that, change that to quit. Don't put it there because I want to have more control. Extra processing, that's where I'm going to do my add, change, delete. In a future video, presentation, whatever, I'm going to show where I don't even use this. I actually move all that to an external function, which gives me a lot more control of my add, change, delete options. It allows me to set it up to send it to historical files and all that other fun stuff. But in general, again, let's blow away those subfile options. I'm speaking fast because I don't want to run out of time. And we're making this output, and we're going to make it same thing. We're going to highlight it. So you'll see at runtime how this just looks nicer. Last part, just going to change the sizing to 78. Boom. Okay, and F4 prompt. Every time I see an F4 prompt, when I used to be project manager and I saw that on screens, I used to just flip out, because if you expect users to push those buttons, they need to do something, in my opinion. So here, 4 equals delete. Let's compile, see how this screen looks now. So you saw the old way. Okay, let's run it. Tell me if this looks any better, guys. As far as, you know, artistically, I mean, you can only do so much with a 5250 screen, right? But so I could do this. And if I hit my F9, I can add, change, delete all on the one screen. And it just looks cleaner. Okay, very simple. So that was kind of my quick and dirty how I would take a paintbrush and clean up a 5250 screen and make it look a little more eye appealing to the end users. So now I'm going to show you the next
Sorry,
part.
just one question. Just one question. Why wouldn't
sure.
you change the standard? Why wouldn't you create a standard screen design with that layout already in it, and add that field to that format as well?
Very good question. Let's put a pin on that. You're talking about templates, which is what this is, what I'm running into next.
Okay.
And I always hit that button by mistake. So get back to here. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Okay, so let me show you now. I'm not sure if I circle back to that question now or on the next presentation. So, but let's just continue this. So I'm going to show you my screen design for real life, real world. So this is me, Pin Inquiry. I'm a courier company. This is our main screen of our tracking. Each one of these pin numbers is like a tracking number that tracks your package, and it determines whether you pick it up or you delivered it or whatever. So notice their screen design. I'm able to toggle between a 120 column display and a 80 column display, hitting F15. Okay. So it's one trick. I'm able to use F10 to put a line in between each screen. This comes from just some people want to see a line in between each screen. I said, sure, F10 will do it. Some people only want to see 80 columns versus a 120 column to screen. Sure, you'll see less data, but I'll give it to you. You can toggle between the two. Then I started doing some funny stuff. Once I came up with this design, I kind of went crazy. So remember what I said. The top is a variable. So if it's variable, I can do F23 and I can change the top, because otherwise it'll be all packed together and eventually you wouldn't understand what each one means. So now, because it's variable, I can make changes. Okay. The question mark, instead of an O, I use question mark. Why? Because if you do question mark, you'll see all the options that are available to you. And you can do a select and it'll take you right into that option. Okay. I'm not showing you how to do this. I'm giving you guys ideas on what you can do with the screen design just to make it look better. Now I get really weird. Now I'm going to go to F24. See, I made the bottom variable too. So now I can have as many function keys as I want on the bottom. So I can have a variable on the top, variable on the bottom. And if you hit I think it's F1 key, you will get all the function keys that are available to you in this screen. And if you select one, it'll zoom into that one. Okay, let's play a little more here. Let's see what else I'm doing. It's kind of neat. So sometimes our customer service, they'll put in a PIN number, boom, and it'll go to the first record, but that's not a match. So they would think, oh, if I put in that, it must be this is the PIN and it shows as delivered. So yes, you're delivered. They don't realize that, no, I just took you to the closest spot on the subfile. It's not the actual match. This PIN is not equal to this, as you can see. So I put a little gizmo here, an asterisk, just a simple thing. You would not believe how much this has saved customer service. Now they know exactly when they typed in that PIN number, they got an identical match there. That's the PIN they want. If they don't see that red asterisk, they know they haven't found the PIN. They either typed it wrong or it hasn't come in our system yet. You know, simple little tricks, tips that'll just makes life so much easier for a person. When I first came here, I was doing this. I was putting in pins and going in. I couldn't figure out why the data was wrong. It's because I didn't know, because it's such a long key that there's no match. I just fooled you by thinking there was a match. Then I went really weird. I made this thing all dynamic. So if you, it's showing you the last operation. So if you hit F6, that last field toggles, and now it'll show you the sign by, it'll show you the creator, it'll show you an error, if there's a bad pin, all that. So I made that dynamic too. Just kind of showing you things for you to think about of what you can do with a screen, a simple sign-on screen design. Once, if you know, you don't know what you don't know, and I haven't seen anything like this out of 2E or out of the AS400. Okay, now we're getting into the weird stuff. So I'm showing you this stuff I actually documented, and it was presented last year as well. How do I do all this? The dynamic stuff. So I did it all in 2E. There's no user source. There's no weird, well, there's maybe a little bit of user source. I shouldn't say that, but it's all 2E files. So every display, every function here, there's the function name, corresponds to a set of records in a file that contains the subfile options and the subfile functions, all neatly laid out here. And I've got all the ability to change it, to change the sequences, the sequencing of where that shows on the screen. So I can do all sorts of manipulation after I've already put the program, this application into production. I can do all this on the side. As you can see, it's all moving around. Then I went really weird. I went a little further. I said, okay, well, what about hiding? If I put a H there to hide this option, it means I don't want it to be displayed to the user. I want it to be like a hidden option. So here you can still use the option, but you don't see it. And I thought, okay, Russ, if I could do that, why don't I use another option? I'm talking faster than my presentation. Well, what about security? Let's put in another flag here. Let's put in a security option. I think it's Y, Russ. Yeah. Security. So now, if I do an S, I can put in user IDs here. So only certain users will have access to certain options. And I can control it all on the fly after it's been put in. Okay, so that's a simple example. It's just doing it. It's allowing me in because I put in Russ Berkeley. And then I can add another header, and that allows me to toggle between with the F23. So it'll accept the first header, and then I can do it for the second header and third header. So I can have as many headers as I want and just toggle through them all.
Hey, Russ, when
Yeah.
you get to a good point, it's time to end about now. So.
Okay, so I am 16 minutes into this 26-minute presentation. So you tell me, I'm sorry, last year I had the whole hour. So when I built these presentations, they were an hour long. I didn't realize I was getting small. segment. I have so much more of this I want to show you guys, so we can circle back if you want, or
I think that'd be good. Why don't we pick it up tomorrow when we have the next, or I think it's tomorrow when we have your next presentation.
sure. The next presentation I'll tell you is the trick or treat one, which is just as long. So again, if you spill, I'll
Okay.
let you know. But there's just so much stuff I want to show. Sorry, I get carried away.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping it's opening your eyes to some nice things that you can do in 2E without using a lot of user source or any, and just using your imagination. So I'll leave it at that because I know you want me to jump out. So I'll stop sharing now and we'll resume. I wrote down the time.
Okay. So, yeah, that's really interesting. You know, everybody has something a little different as far as building screens. And it's really good to see what different people do because, you know, it's a way for you to build upon your knowledge. And thank you for showing us the ideas. Yep.
Well, I think that some of your screens are probably a damn sight more efficient than what some .NET developer would do with a whole bunch of drop downs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. Yep. All right. So we'll take a break here and come
Sure.
back in about 10 minutes. And then at that point, Kiyoshi's going to present some information to us.